Hi, Kate.
Hey, Dan.
So,
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order, the January 16th HPRC work session. It is 6:10, and I think everybody that is supposed to be here is here. So first on our agenda today is the Indian Hot Springs local historic designation discussion. So if you want to start, Dylan?
Sure, yeah, I will start with just a little bit of background from the staff report that was included in the packet, and then I will pass it along to Dan from the Hot Springs and Kate McCoy from CPI for questions and for any presentation on their end. So, Indian Hot Springs is pursuing local designation. There's a number of reasons that they would like to do so, which I'll let them speak to a little bit more. But as far as history is concerned, hot springs were developed in the mid-1860s. They've had a lot of different developments since. Buildings have come and gone, but the main hotel building that they're looking to designate, and there will clarify specifically what is up for designation as part of this. But the main hotel building was built in 1915 during the period of significance, and it has not been substantially altered during that period. There is in the notes, it mentioned that the hotel lobby interior had burned in the 1950s, and they replaced that with non-significant cladding, stone cladding, but that doesn't detract from the historical character of the building, in staff's opinion. A little bit on process before getting into the criteria would be that if it is designated, it becomes subject to Chapter 21 requirements to have certificate of appropriateness before exterior work can be done to the contributing designating structure, which benefits the city. It would also require review by the HPRC. If designated, they may also apply for state and national, but I'll let Dan and Kate talk about that process a little bit more, and about potential tax credits and what they might be used for. So the municipal code, section 22-22-A, has 7 criteria. Staff believes it might meet 3 of these criteria, and it doesn't have to meet all of them to be worthy of designation. But the first one, we believe it meets the requirement that it be associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of the city's history. There's significant evidence that there's a main tourist or contributing tourist attraction to the city. As early as when the train was here, as early as even when George Jackson, sort of first found gold in the area. Soon thereafter, our city's historic resource survey plan from 2022 speak of it as a destination for health seekers and other visitors, both during wagon and stagecoach age and with automobiles. So staff believes it contributes to that history. Staff also believes that it's associated with lives of people significant to the city's past, including the founder, Dr. Ian Cummings. Historical Society talks about how George Jackson may have been attracted to the area because of the hot springs, which obviously doesn't relate to the structure, but relates to the springs in general. And my staff report talks about a number of influential people who visited the resort over the years. So staff believes it meets that one. We also believe that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of the type, period, and method of construction. And I've included some quotes from the historic resources survey plan that speak to its integrity as a high integrity structure of the rustic late 19th, 20th century. It's within the period of significance and still embodies those distinctive characteristics that it began with. So those are 3 criteria we believe it meets. I did note, or Lisa helpfully noted, an error in this staff report where I wrote that we believe that designating the hotel as a local historic structure would be negative, but staff believes it would be positive too.
Second paragraph of the analysis.
Yeah, I wrote staff does not believe that it would be positive, but I meant to say staff doesn't, well,
Staff believes it will be
staff believes
positive.
it would be positive, so.
Take a negative word.
Yeah, so I had an error there, but I think so anyway, long story short, staff recommends that HPRC makes a recommendation to city council in favor of designation as listed in the staff report. The next step would be for it to be scheduled as a public hearing item with city council if HPRC recommends that to happen. Any comments and feedback are appreciated and will be taken to council as well. And I'll leave it at that. Any questions from me?
I think my
I'll
questions
now,
are probably
but-
better for Daniel.
Okay, well, with that, I'll pass it on to Daniel and Kate. And, I don't know, Dan, if you have anything you want to speak to specifically before we kind of open it up to questions, but feel free.
Good evening, guys. Yeah, appreciate the intro, Dylan. Basically, when I was doing a lot of research for finding out a lot of the water analysis and trying to renovate this whole building, I started realizing that going through the process with talking to Mary Jane at Argo Mills and CPI, that's when I realized there was no historic designation. I did start working to move forward with a lot of the CD docs before the grant money, and we did submit in December. Unfortunately, got rejected because there was no clarity on the nomination, and so I'm looking for that local nomination first, and then hopefully as time goes on for the state and regional.
Kate, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I'll just add that designation opens a lot of doors for grant funding and tax credits. And this is a huge project for Dan to get this place, in better shape and to preserve its historic integrity. And I think grant funding and tax credits would really go a long way to help him do that. And so the designation is partly in the service of that, but it's an important site in Idaho Springs. I think you'll probably all agree. And having it locally designated, I think, is really important for the city.
Okay. Commission, do we have any questions? I have some questions.
Yes.
Yes.
So when I look at the packet that was put together, you mentioned not only the main building, which is blocks 1 through 4. And by the way, thank you for that, how you broke that down. That actually made it much more understandable for how things were built in the timeline, because it does seem like this is sort of a messy timeline, at least not with a lot of clarity of who did what. But are you asking to just designate the main building, or do you want buildings 2 and 3 to be part of that? Because when I see on, let's see, page 25 and 26, you're designating the whole property. So that includes buildings 2 and 3. Are you looking to designate both the big main building and buildings 2 and 3? Because those are not in our period of significance. And through the packet, it wasn't clear if it was the whole plat of the property or if it was just the building.
So we're actually, so it'd be the main building itself. I think we did actually all that parcel itself because one, it would help maybe the confusion of like where we are trying to sit with the water as well on the well. I've done as much research as possible. And of course I'm still learning as I go, but where that cabin is right now, it used to be where the natatorium was.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Kate to kind of input on this, but we were talking about how if we can do the whole area that is historical, that it doesn't bind us in some aspects.
Kate, do you have anything to add to that?
I was not clear that those other buildings were up for designation. That doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. But what might make sense, and I don't know if there's any precedent for this at all, but if the water itself, the spring itself, could be designated as well as the original building, since the spring has been in operation since the 1860s. So Dan, am I wrong about this? Did you want to designate those other buildings that were built later?
No, definitely not.
I
Building
didn't
two
think
and
so.
three wasn't something that I was even ever looking at. I think it was just speaking about the area of the building and helping whatever's needed to help with like the civil engineer, with the mountain and the water coming through. So
Commission, any other questions?
No, I just mentioned it would probably be helpful when this goes to city council. If that was marked on the map, so that they can distinguish. I see that there's an overall property boundary mark, but
Yes,
it would be good to clarify your question on the map. So city council understands what we just discussed.
yeah, because that wasn't clear, and so I want to I want to make sure that you understand when you work with us in a local district, like you're partnering with us now. Meaning HPRC in the city, that
Right.
actually more regulations on you, so that's why I was asking, do you want to add more buildings to this? Like, let's be very clear what you want
Okay.
to partner with the HPRC on and what is not part of that.
Okay.
We will also create a city map of
Okay.
some kind, because I did not include one of those.
And the GIS includes building footprints, so you'd be
Okay.
able to make something,
And I can,
make a
that's-
GIS map where you could then identify the footprints of the buildings.
And I can clarify.
How do,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
what is our thought process on the spring? Because I really like Kate's idea that the spring is also a historical piece.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because there's other features in town that we've got obviously a bridge out here. We've talked before about going up Virginia Canyon, there's a very long stone wall going up the canyon, so getting some of these other features, or we've also talked about the route of the CNS Railroad, that's where it ran through town. So those are just things to provide more interest when people come and visit, to know about the history of the community.
Well, I would support that, as far as that being a designation. How do you guys feel about it?
Would it be like where it comes out of the ground or where it sort of
that's a
meets
good
up
question.
with Clear Creek? I guess it's a question of scale too, like how much.
Kate, do you have ideas on that?
Well, kind of. This is just, shooting in the dark and, seeing where it lands. But if the water itself, where it comes out and comes into the building, were designated, that would make grant proposals to work on plumbing and things like that more competitive. So there's that. But because the spring has been in operation since the 1860s, I think there's a good argument for that water and its delivery, for health purposes, recreation purposes, to be designated. Does that make sense?
It does, that gives it a scope and, a framework versus, because Stephanie's question is a good one, like how big is the scope of designating the water? If you designate the source and how it comes into the building, that is not just a free-for-all as far as any water that comes from the spring. Is it 100 feet down from the building?
Right.
Yeah, I like though that specific designation, like the source of it and where it comes into the building, because then that affects the delivery. Can I ask, and this is not necessarily, Dan, this is not necessarily anything to do with the interior, what are your plans, particularly if the water is designated, what are your plans for the caves and how the water, like, and the pool? Because that's part of the water piece of this.
Yeah, so with that pool being, I guess, an add-on, I believe it was in the 70s. That's what me and Kate were talking about. That does still fit into the historical piece now that it's been 50 years. So just to kind of give you a step back, right now we have two current wells, the north and the south one. I took it to myself to get a well meter on both of them to see how they're cased, and they're cased properly, and then just kind of really understand how it's coming up and what's coming up, gallons per minute, heat, pretty much everything on that, to kind of use that as a mechanical for the mechanical engineer to either replumb it, because right now it's really just going into our building. And then, of course, with our ORC water professionals, before it goes into our sediment tank, and then it goes into some of the rivers, because the discharge goes into the state. And so right now it's really just we're kind of at the mercy of these wells, where most of the hot springs they reuse the water of it, as it kind of continues back and forth. The plans were to really kind of, I want to keep the charm, because I mean 99% of the people that come, they love it. It's very unique. They call it quirky in a way, but I want to make the amenities where they're kind of honed in. We're not just, again, keep saying the mercy of the well, where if these pools can be consistently heated at certain temperatures, we're not, and of course the water, like for instance, when we have to clean the pool, it'll take about 2-3 days to fill that pool back up, compared to having a reservoir tank with an actual filtration system room. And also right now our iron composites are so high that the PVC pipes pretty much get clogged up within 3 months, and we have to replace them every time. So it's basically just always consistently. I feel like if I can get this honed in from the filter room, there's so many other things we can help, because obviously with water, it's a great amenity, but it's not the best for buildings and such like that.
What, are you planning to keep the corrugated plastic up top?
Yeah, so there's two plans that the team from CPI and Foreman Works started to think about. Was if it was a historical designation and they're like, hey, we have to keep it as is, it's going to cost maybe a little bit more than an actual new building that can be glassed and really mechanical based, so that humidity level, temperature can be all controlled. Right now, it's fiberglass material, which has no R rating, and we thought about polycarbonate, which still only has, like, I think, an 8 R rating, and it really kind of goes backwards. So I've done as much as possible recently with getting better heat sources and the humidity level down, but it's really what I'm granted in terms of if they want to keep that dome as is, and they'll make it as perfect as possible in 2024 standards, compared to a new kind of glass house.
Mm-hmm. So one of the thoughts was so if it were necessary to designate the pool house that's covered with the fiberglass, then it would probably need to be replaced in kind and look like it looks. But if that pool house could not be part of the designation, then Dan might be free to do something else with that, according to the Secretary of Interior standards and according to, your regulations and stuff. So I don't know how you guys feel about that. And, a decision has not been made, as far as I know, from Dan and the team. It's just, we have these two options, basically. And I think it's important to think about what's important to designate and what is not. And is the pool house important to designate? I'd like to hear from you guys what you might think about that.
Commission? What are your thoughts?
It's a tough one.
I forgot to answer the other question about the caves. Currently the caves are we shotcreted everything that needed to be shotcreted and really made it 100% fully safe. Added new lights, new strands, new electricity, the whole 9 yards. And so in terms of expansion, I can't even think about that right now because that's not something that that's not something that I've been eyeing. It was I do have really big visions, and I've talked to John about them, and he gets really excited. But I do know that this is a huge component in terms of many people I talked to Denver about even their comments like, "Oh, I haven't been there in XYZ," but I think if this could be such a cool spot and adding on more pools naturally outside, I think it could just be a huge hub again. I know it is already, but yeah, a real big staple.
I think there's either a situation of the period of significance, or because of the uniqueness as a building, the 50-year rule might also come into play, in which it could be something outside of the period of significance.
But still within the 50-year rule. Well, isn't part of it too, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dylan, isn't part of it too with the local designation that we're allowed to tailor some of that local designation?
We can designate any, the town can designate anything.
That's what I thought. Well, because when you look at the description, it describes the different blocks of the main building. And that pool and the covering are not part of the period of significance, but I do think they contribute to the overall significance of the building. That would be my thought. What are your all's thoughts?
I agree with that. I think a lot of people come up here just for the pool. So when you keep it in conjunction with the building, it is just a better draw and gives people more opportunities. And you know, that's part of what the springs are known for too, not just the water in the springs, but the pool with the plants in there. Yes. And you know, that's why people come up a lot.
And sorry to cut you guys off for input, but you're right. When that main pool's down, we lose 95% business. And plenty of people, they love the greenery. That actually is the one reason during the pandemic we really survived, was wellness was a key component, and it felt like they were out and about instead of stuck at home.
I would like to see then, because I do see your concerns about how do you, if you have to replace that in kind, like what does that look like? But I also have concerns if we designate this as a local, you know, designated area, I don't want to see that not be part of it. I would like that. I don't know how to do that though. Because the building, like that is in your report, that is not part of our period of significance, and it was not built in before 1920, but it's still a significant part of the building. Like, how do we tailor that?
Well, as I mentioned, there's what are called the criteria that we have more or less parallel the national criteria.
Yes.
In addition to the criteria, that's what are referred to as the criteria considerations. And one of the 7 criteria considerations is the 50-year rule. But the thing that's misunderstood about that is the people seem to think anything that's 50-years old is qualifies. But the idea now is that it also, in addition to being 50 years old, it also needs to be a unique or exemplary or a great example of something. And we only have one hot springs facility, so that makes it a unique facility.
Yes, I would, yeah.
So I think it's worth considering. And for example, Aspen actually has 2 periods of significance. They have the mining period, and then they have the World War II period for all the Alpine architecture that was built there. So that's something that the city and this committee might want to look at in terms of how to address other things that have historic significance.
Okay, I'm totally
past 1920, right? Because that's with the local, it ends at 1920. It seems like pretty early to me. I mean,
And I think it's the key thing is with the property owner understanding that if it is part of what's designated locally, that as you said earlier, it then becomes regulated
It's regulated in a partnership like that, you know.
in terms of complying with the design guidelines.
Yes.
Right.
So when you are discussing the pool, are you also referring to the dome?
I would
I
think
would
so,
think so,
because it's part of the building.
Because it's part of the
Yeah.
building, and to me, it's a distinctive characteristic of the makeup of the building. No, it's not period of our national period of significance, but it's a distinctive characteristic and listed in that blocks 1 through 4 that make up the main building.
I agree.
So I think we have to have a little more specific breakdown of how we're designating this. You know, and like Mike said, we can designate whatever we want, but how do we designate this so that it gives the property owner, you know, that 50-year rule of it doesn't have to be 1920s,
Right.
and maybe we have some flexibility with in kind.
And we may need to add some language to the municipal code in terms of acting outside of the period of significance, but that's not an unusual thing to do.
Well, there are also, like, there is a drive, I think, to add local periods of significance in different areas of town.
Yes, and actually, one of the biggest things that's occurring in historic preservation now is looking at things beyond buildings. And what they're talking about are cultural, things that have cultural significance. In addition to architectural significance, historic preservation, as it's practiced today, was, because mostly architects were involved, was focused on architecture. And now there's looking at maybe there's other things that where something, a significant historic event took place, but the building has nothing of value in terms of architecture.
so more like a landscape approach than.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a cultural landscape.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the commission? So with our discussion, Dylan, of needing to maybe fine tune some of that within the different blocks as they list it in their report. I like the blocks. I think the blocks makes it easy to determine the various portions of the building. Do we need to amend the staff recommendation?
Well, I think we would need to amend the recommendation to include the pool structure. And then I guess we could clarify.
But also the water, because it says
Yes.
the main, let's see.
Yes, the recommendation only includes the main hotel building as constructed in 1914.
Yeah,
is
so
what
that
I
would be
was
the water.
recommending. And so in addition, it sounds like we'd want to include the pool building as a recommendation, as a unique sort of exceptional example of something that's
Hot Springs culture, like,
newer.
to me, it's a Hot Springs culture, the way that it's evolved.
Right. And so then on top of that, the water, which clearly is well, even before our period of significance, but through it and continuing to today.
To help them with their schedule, would we be able to just say so moved as discussed? And allow staff to write that out?
Yeah, I have on here in my notes that yeah, essentially you'd recommend that the main hotel building be designated in addition to the waters themselves and the existing pool structure. Does that sound?
Does it sound to you all?
Good, so everything attached to the.
I'm okay if this becomes 3 or 4 sentences, so that we
Yeah.
cover
Yeah.
everything, so that we are very clear moving forward. Okay. Then I would take a recommendation from,
Can I interject just for a second? Dan, how are you feeling about the existing pool structure being designated?
I mean, I love current pool.
Yeah.
I think it's charming. I just want it to be proper. I want it to do the things needed to. I never. I So lately we've gotten two new botanists that have been really into that dome more than ever. We're just getting more and more comments. I've gotten tags kind of like the Botanic Garden where they can look at what they're looking at, right? Their real names and then their plant names and where their origins are. People just love it. It creates such an environment. Of course, in new standards, a glass A-frame, not A-frame, but like a barn frame would be awesome too. But I think people just always recognize that dome more than anything.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there might be some negotiations possible and some leeway to try to get a better R value for a replacement material for that dome. And so I'm just concerned with making, keeping its character, but also making it more efficient and usable. And I know that's part of your concern too, Dan.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, sorry.
Oh, and in doing that with the shape, if there were a change of material, would the shape be the same?
I mean, so I guess a dome, excuse me, a dome is by far the worst way of so glass is the best way for this greenhouse. It'll hold R value. You can have double pane and it'll do the same kind of effect that we're after, right? Which is that clear view feeling where you can get the sun in. And so when I researched all with a bunch of subcontractors, general contractors, they all wanted to get rid of the actual half dome and just get a barn style. But again, what Kate was saying was, if it changes the look of it, then, but I don't know if the cost is 2 times more, but to look the same, is it really worth it? I'm not sure.
Maybe that piece should be delayed.
My other question is, as in some ways you could see by protecting both the water and the existing dome and its current materials, you may in fact be in the long term hurting the water if the materials don't allow it to be properly. But yeah, I do think that would be the only concern, is if they could even maintain the general structure, the dome feel, the plants, all of that, it's that more important than the polycarbonate sort of
Or the open
now.
glass feel, that's more where I would see.
Because that would be the concern, is if we're not concerned with it maybe going to open glass, being more, you can see out, see in, see the plants, all that. If that's not the concern with doing that, if it maintains everything else, then the question becomes, can we do it without then being beholden to the guidelines and not allow us to do so?
And there's a couple other things that I'd like to input. So currently the dome sits against the mountain, and based off of what the foreman works people want to do, there's going to be a civil engineer to really guide out all that ice melt and waterfall from that mountain to trench out. So then the dome structure kind of changes a little bit depending on how the wings kind of go out. And then just to say what Dylan was saying, I think for any plans anyone wants to do is make sure it does look similar, but make sure that it's sound and mechanical sound, right? So the humidity is one of the biggest components to a deteriorating building, and that dome itself is definitely not keeping. We can't hold in humidity. We can't, or it's sometimes too humid.
And when that thing was built, I mean, it wasn't engineered very well, because what's happening is that the steel that's supporting it is rotting and you're having to monitor it. Did you get the monitoring instructions from the engineers, Dan, about that?
They gave me a basis, but yeah, so exactly what Kate was saying is there are certain things that that was put in place to make sure that the metal structure and the dome itself is a little tilting. But with the Foreman Works guys, they're asking me to monitor every month to see how much it's tilting to a degree. And yeah, like Kate said, humidity with metal, of course, it's not it's the worst enemy. And of course, there's new there's new techniques and new stuff that you can spray on metal that's going to last a long time. So I don't think keeping the dome like for like is impossible. But we were told that it was going to be very costly.
I think it would make sense to sort of exclude that
The dome
for
itself.
now, so that it could be studied further, but go ahead with the rest.
I would agree with that, because if it's falling apart, like I don't want to designate something that is not going to be structurally sound.
Yeah.
The next, like that creates, to me, that creates an onerous burden that I don't know that that's appropriate for us to designate.
Mhm.
I guess then stating that there are two structures that just to make sure that we're identifying that they do want to get rid of as well, so it's not significant, is at the end of the dome, there's a storage kind of area where Foreman Works asked me if I was interested in keeping this or I guess renovating it. And I said, if it costs more to keep, then I don't think it's necessary based off of the vision I wanted, which was another walk path outside for more pools. That was one structure. And then the second one was near our kitchen on the edge. There's a small room that's pretty much deteriorating. And based off of what the civil engineering has to do, they really don't want that room, or they want that room half the size.
Are they part of the original block 2 or 4?
I'm sorry?
The original, like that original 1915 building, or are they the additions? Because they're
more on the edge of the addition. So they do feel like where the swimming pool era was these two buildings added on.
it's like the 60s. Okay.
Yeah.
I think with this, we would need to see, like, it would need to be a very specific detail of what falls into the historic designation and what is maybe.
Are there any architectural plans yet?
There's a schematic design document.
I think that would help us define what's included and what's not.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to share that report with them somehow?
Yeah, I can send it to Dylan right now.
Yeah, it's very large. I'm not sure it'll email. You might have to send them a link to its
Okay.
Dropbox location. I'm not sure.
Share your screen.
Yeah, you can share your screen.
I'm sorry, I have two different computers. I'm on an iPad and.
Oh, I can pull that up.
Oh, okay.
Do you want
I'll
me
just
to
send
pull
it to
it
you
up?
while you do it. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, you should
I
have
might have downloaded it.
to share. But we could certainly.
I did. I have it right here. Okay.
Between this meeting and when it's scheduled for council, we can put together a very specific sort of these structures, walls or portions of structures that proposed.
I just send you the Dropbox link as well.
All right, so I'm just scrolling through. Here's the historic photos. Y'all can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Lots of historic photos.
Oh, but they're great.
Yeah, they're great. This is a really thorough and a really good report from Formworks.
Could we get access to it somehow? That would.
Yeah, but if that's
that'd be
their
nice to
report,
see.
I don't know that that's.
Oh, are we not supposed to look at it?
Oh no,
I
you
don't
can.
know.
You
You
can look
guys,
at it.
you guys are more than welcome to look at it. It's honestly very thorough and it's very helpful.
trying to get to, so they're documenting conditions. Dan, if I get to any of those additions that you're talking
right,
about, this
right
one,
there.
right?
Yeah,
So this part here is one of the additions that you would like to get, that the engineers are suggesting to get rid of. Is that
yeah,
correct?
they just said it's really going five, 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards in terms of if it has zero value to you, then I said, yeah, I don't, it does nothing to me in terms of function and how it's set up right now.
Mhm. So that's one thing. Do any of these photographs show that addition that's off the kitchen area?
Let me see.
I
No,
don't think so.
not yet. I wish I would have said something. It's more
Are
down.
you, are you able to scroll to the schematic plan that you have?
Yes. Okay, let me see if I can make this bigger.
And while you're doing that, I'll look for that room on this PDF.
Is this it?
Yes.
This is it, right?
Wait, I'm sorry. Let's see, stair header. No, that's not it.
That's not it, okay.
I'll definitely find it though.
But it is on the first floor.
Correct. Yeah.
Um,
Can you see that?
I thought that was it, but where is it, Dan?
This is on. Let me see where we're at.
I'm on the first floor.
Okay. If you go all the way left near the dining hall.
Oh, these are all rooms. Maybe it's on a different page.
Yeah, because that's area A.
It's here, I have it coming up.
Oh, here's area B. I think it's maybe in this area.
It should be further left.
Further left. Okay, maybe there's another. Okay, I see.
This building is funky.
This area. This one. This is it, right? This area appears to consist of 4 additions and is in poor condition considered
Yeah.
demolition of east
Yeah.
addition.
Correct.
And that's on the mountain side of the building?
Yes.
That's correct. Yep.
And do you know time-wise when this area that's in poor condition, when that was constructed?
I believe in the 60s based off of how it was just looking and what the materials were, just based off of the asbestos testing as well.
Okay, and what would be the date for the rest of it would fall under the 50-year rather than under the period of significance?
So everything in that non-purple area is all the super historical building.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
1915?
Yeah, 1915.
Right? The pool structure was built in the 60s, right?
Yeah, actually, if you go up a little bit, Kate, and to your right, there's a picture of this room right there to your right, top right. See?
Oh,
yeah.
there it is.
Okay.
Boy, it looks terrible. I haven't really seen that view.
You're talking about eliminating that.
Yeah, because the way the mountain is draining downwards to the building, they believe that they're gonna need quite a bit of spacing. They asked me what I wanted for that build or the that room for. It was supposed to be a bigger employee lounge, so they are gonna try to work out to reduce that. It's a big room, so they're trying to see if they could reduce about 40%. But that whole room itself needs to be redone.
I think in addition to what we were talking before about a site plan, that indicates the buildings. I think it would be both in the city's interest and the owner's interest if there was also a plan that clearly defined what's the extent of what's included and what's not included, because that's the kind of thing that could be a disagreement in the future
Yes.
if we don't get it defined now.
Somewhere, and I'm not sure what page it was on, there is a diagram of the building and you have out as A, B, C, D, E, like maybe something like
Oh,
that.
like a key.
Yeah, like a key that shows us, okay, A and B and part of C,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, are like where, what.
Oh, I see it. It's in page 84.
You could take a simple shape like that and just delineate. If there's areas such as that shed that you're talking, that one-story structure.
Yeah.
You're saying, believe that should be excluded. That outline would probably be sufficient to mark up, to indicate what's included and what's not.
That's what cause that lays it out very clearly.
Because this is something that very easily could be misunderstood 5 years from now.
Yes.
So it'd
No
be better to
problem.
get it defined now.
I agree
And
with that.
just based off this key plan, it would definitely be the E section, which is the one that you saw on the edge of the dome earlier.
Right, so the D section is the dome, right?
Yeah. So E section is that edge of the,
Right.
that was facing.
Yeah,
from
let me go
ground.
back to that photo.
And that little bit of the sea on the mountainside, on the east side, that's where you're wanting to get rid of that building.
Well, I guess, yeah, now I'm talking about it. I guess it technically, quote unquote, should be included, but it will be not redone the way it is now currently. So I don't know in terms of language what we would want to state.
I think that like having that key and saying this piece and this piece are designated, this piece and this piece are not. I agree with you, Mike, because I'm also looking 10 years down the road, if somebody other than Daniel is in charge, does that create, a problem because it's not clear what is designated, what is not?
Right, and I would have the question on like the front, the portion that was rebuilt, like the bridge. The bridge itself is outside the period of significance, but it's part of the current structure, so would that be part of the designation? Or could that just be modified without COA?
Well, generally, when something is designated, it's the building and its surroundings. But then it's understood that if there are part of the surroundings that have no historic significance, they were a later addition, that's something that can be modified. However, if something's in dilapidated condition, unless it's unsafe, just being dilapidated does not say it's not important historically to be saved. So that's the key. That's actually what we're considering rather than the physical condition is there any reason to save this one-story shed area from a historic standpoint? If there isn't, then its removal is not an issue. If it is significant, if it is tied to the main structure, same time period and so forth, and it should be rehabilitated rather than demolished.
So then would you, as an HRPRC, recommend that part of the council's review of this would be to specifically go through and look at the areas that the owner is planning to or would like to designate versus would not like to designate, and have approved that, I suppose?
Yes, but I guess the question I'd like to ask now, if this were to be continued, how does that affect the schedule of the property owner? If this were to continue to another meeting so that this board could see a plan that is marked up?
So we would really love to go in for an April State Historical Fund grant. And I mean, the designation was only part of the questions that reviewers had. I guess it was maybe the biggest one. Then there were some just misunderstandings about the project.
So
Which
if there were another meeting in February where this committee could look at a plan and the photographs that go with the plan, is that going to delay your schedule if that were to occur in February?
If that occurred in February, when would a potentially a listing be able to be public?
So for just like a general, just generally, it looks like in February, the regularly scheduled HPRC meeting is February 20th. There's city council meetings on the February 12th and February 26th. So let's say in this example, we could continue this to the 20th and then we went on the 26th to city council. Because it's an ordinance, it will need a first reading and a second reading per code, which means it would be designated.
March 11th,
But does the reading have to be 30 days?
so it'd be the 25th.
I think it would be the 25th. So in that scenario where we pushed it out a month and came back here on February 20th, I think the soonest we could designate if council, did first reading, approved on second reading would be March 25th. Or alternatively, April 8th, I guess it would be the first April meeting.
Right. Well, the grant is due April, I think it's April 2nd, whatever that Monday is, which I think is April 1st, possibly.
Yeah, April 1st is the first Monday.
Yeah, and that's when those grants are due. And it would be better to have it designated by the time of that submission. Just because, I mean, even though no physical work was proposed, people get confused, reviewers get confused, and a property does not have to be designated to receive funding for non-physical work. And this was just a complete CD project. But reviewers were still like dinging us because it wasn't clear about the designation at that point. So, I mean, all of that is to say that, I mean, March 25th can work. We'll just get the grant all done and cross our fingers that everything goes as planned and get that in.
I think it would be good to be able to see a plan, know the boundaries, because I think if we have questions, city council might have questions too, and then they're going to delay.
Yes, I would rather have us hash it out before we send it to city council, so that it can be presented by Dylan very clearly. Like, actually HPRC has gone over this, because I don't want to send something to city council that is not complete
Or clear.
And creates problems for Dan or the city or both 2 or 3 years down the road, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
That totally makes sense. What format would be helpful for you all to receive this information? So do you want photographs?
It would be good to have the floor plans and then to save the work of having to draw elevations if you had photographs that go with it. In other words, you could list on the floor plan, where's this photograph taken? What do we, just put an arrow pointing to the location where photograph 7 is taken.
Well, fortunately, that's in this report. So we'll just be able, I think, to excerpt this report.
To define it a little bit more instead of searching for different pages.
Yep, exactly.
So what we need to know is what's included, what's being excluded.
Okay.
And how do we address the dome? Because I do think, a better R value, is there a better, to me, what I think is, you guys tell me what you think, what I think is significant is the fact that it's clear, the sun comes in, you get a sense of the outside while you're inside. But I think from a structural standpoint, it's managing the humidity, having an R value, like keeping the building together.
Does the shape play into it at all, like the dome shape?
Shape is usually significant, and there are other ways of doing a rounded dome shape, a geodesic dome. But I think that may be something we need to know more about. Again, we don't want to be creating a practical problem in the future. So it'd be better to get that defined as well.
Maybe like ideas of what are your top three? So that I don't know how to address, I don't know how to address this.
But are we not doing the dome?
Are we excluding the dome? Is that what we decided?
Didn't we decide that we were just gonna do the water and the main building and look at the dome later because of what
Yes.
it's
For the
gonna take?
timeline.
Yeah, so we can make their timeline and then we can look at the dome later. Can we not add it on?
Okay, and what would be the basis of excluding the dome besides that it may be a practical, too expensive problem to fix? What would distinguish it from the rest of the project that's gonna be designated?
Well, wasn't the main designation gonna be the building and the water?
But the dome is part of the building.
It did come later.
I did have a question. You
Yeah.
can, so just going based off of if we designate those two and then add the dome, is that possible?
At the dome now, at the dome later?
Yeah, add the dome later.
Well, I guess my question is, if we do designate it, it's one or the other, correct? If we do it now, is that it's either they say like for like or do it like but better, correct? Or no?
I think like for like or like but better can both be applied with the 50-year rule. Like, we're not in the period of significance, we're in the 50-year rule,
Right.
which suggests a little more elasticity.
And we're gonna need to explore the 50-year rule
Yes.
to the code anyway.
Well, because the section of code suggests, I think we're referring, let me share. Well, I might not do that, but section 22-22 criteria for designation. B7 says designation of properties achieving significance within the past 50 years is forbidden unless such properties are of exceptional importance. 50 years is a general estimate of the period of time necessary for the development of the historic perspective necessary to evaluate significance.
I would say this is easily an important structure in the overall history of the community.
Now, this structure was built in the 60s, right? So that's more than 50 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
This says less than 50 years. So does that change anything?
Well, it basically, if you're at least 50 years old, it makes it easier to justify designating it historically. But then it needs to be more than just 50 years old. There has to be something else. And there are many reasons why this is a significant property.
And that, like, even if it's 65, that's still almost 60 years, 70. Right?
Yeah, and it's over it would be 58, yes, if it's 65.
I'm just taking, I don't know exactly what, I'm just taking the middle of the 60s.
But no, that's a good clarification to say, like, it's older than 50 years, you can certainly consider it if it's important. If it's less than 50 years, but it's exceptionally important, then it could still be considered based on that.
Well, this is
Yes.
older than 50 years.
Right.
That's what this
Yeah.
suggests. And I agree with you. It's important. This is significant.
And so this would also allow time for the owner to do further exploration into the dome, since we're gonna be coming back next month to look at it. Maybe by then you can better define for us
Your
the situation
options or
with
what
the
you're
dome.
thinking or.
Yeah, I can. That's what I was thinking was as long as we can nominate everything as a bundle, I can get it defined where there's A or B, which is like for like or like for better, which is A. There's no really. There's just two options, to be honest.
If, and this is just a question in general, is if Dan wanted to say, I don't want this building, I don't want the pool structure to be designated, but I want the rest. And they want that to still be the ask. I guess there's nothing from recommendations of HPRC that says they would have to include it. I'm wondering if there's any, like, would they, is there an ability to deny local designation if it's not included? I guess that would be the potential outcome is,
And what's the approximate date of the pool?
sometime in the 1960s.
Let's take an average 1963, 65.
That's fine. Either way, it's gonna be more than 50 years.
Yeah. So I suppose if you had a structure, well, that's the question, I suppose, is if the owners are asking to nominate something that's within the period of significance and nothing else.
So do you
but
only
we're
want to nominate
recommending-
part of the structure, like blocks 3 and 4, which are the original 1915 building, and the rebuilt, like the bridge and the rebuilt lobby with the
Yeah,
cladding?
could you do that? Because it sounds
You
like in
could-
some sense
you-
we're asking to do that because they want to exclude portions that are like, kind of part like that
The-
one-story shed.
The
north of the-
the way it generally works is the whole building is actually designated, but how the guidelines treat the different parts of the building changes. So in other words, a historic part from the period of significance is treated one way. Something that is not from the period of significance, for example, could even be demolished if we're staying only within the period of significance and not looking at the 50-year rule.
I would like to see something that encompasses the 50-year rule with this, because I do think some of the aspects of this building that are 58 to 60 years old are important.
I think it also comes into play with, there is another historic period in this city, even though it's not designated, and that is the whole highway tourism. And I think this property is part of that.
I would agree with that.
So my suggestion would be is if we could just get more information to look at the next meeting, and the property owner could give us, in addition to the information, clarity on the direction they think they're realistically have to go.
Mhm.
Like the, like
Yeah.
for like or better, like your two A B options with that.
Yeah, and yeah, I got a gist for sure on it, and I can get it more defined for you guys to just see one or two. It was just a lot of meetings with them and asking how important that dome look was for me, and I stated whatever was the best route for one, of course, the historical side, and then two for the future. That's why we're, restoring things.
So Dan, I know that design of that pool area was not part of this schematic design, and we had intended for the deliberations and design of that to be part of the next project.
Right.
So we don't have designs, but
We
do you
don't-
have designs and ideas?
No, we don't have designs, but I think they would be able to give us rough estimates, I guess, if that helps. I don't know.
Or rough drawings or like?
Yeah, it was the engineer guys that said they could give me a rough, general cost of like for like, but that's also not too defined or descriptive. And then the second one was like for better, right? So it's doing the same feeling of what it is currently, but 10 times better in terms of structure, mechanical, R ratings, and so on. So and that's where they thought I would want to go, depending on if it was nominated or not.
Right. So I guess my question for the commission here is that do you want to see examples of possible designs that are not replacing the dome as it is before you would want to make a determination about designating or not? I'm just a little unclear about what you might want.
I think at this point, what we actually need is the more information to clarify what we're looking at. I think with respect to the dome and something that's outside of the period of significance, I think we just would have to look at that in terms of, are we only looking at period of significance project, or are we looking at something that's also the 50-year rule?
Mhm.
And we also need to understand, do we need to make a code change regarding the 50-year rule? Because it's not, we haven't designated another period, although we can consider it.
Well, I'm all for designating another period, but,
So I think we need to do some homework as well before the next.
well, the other
meeting.
question is, Dan, what do you want to designate?
Um,
You want the whole building, like that A through E in your key? If you want-
A through D for sure. I already have the idea of what to give you guys in terms of that map and the legend of the room and pictures and 1, 2, 3. So it's very simple to see from the schematics of like a bird's eye view.
Because the reason I ask that is if you want A through D, that's pretty much the whole building. So it does, like, you're asking for not only the building that fits in the period of significance, but the stuff that fits within the 50-year rule. So we have
Correct.
to look at, like, how are we gonna designate that within that 50+ year rule? So if you can show us, like, if you were going to replace the dome, it would be A or B, so that we can look at that and say, okay, we're good with either one of these, or we like this, this.
Or it's just A through D and not E.
Well, E
Yeah.
is that little,
Here's that little,
Well,
D
if you want to be more
building.
specific, it would be A through C is where it's the historical, and then D is the question mark of maybe the 50-year that you guys are requesting.
Yeah, and if you would, if we're designating that whole A through D, I would like to know what D looks like.
Okay.
What D's, the plan for D is, because I keep thinking, going back to what Mike said about, I don't want this to 10 years down the road, it becomes a locked horn.
Very confusing. Yeah,
Council, because it's not clear, because we didn't do enough due diligence.
I understand.
But I appreciate you willing to go through this with us so that we can, you know.
Of course. I mean,
figure out
it's
what
it's a very
A through D
unique.
is.
Yeah, it's a very unique building, and like you guys said, if we go to that dome and do the historical and it has to be like for like, I don't know if it's the best route for the future. But if you're saying in that dome, it could be the 50-year where there is, it's really falling in between, right? So it's historical and significant, but it's much better as a like for better, in my opinion.
And it might be possible to treat it differently.
Well, that's what I mean, that, because if we do A through C, if you think about that key, A through C is our period of significance.
Yeah.
And D is the 50+ year rule, and so we can designate it appropriately for both pieces of that building.
Right, but that's what we need.
Yeah,
We need more information and they need more information.
yes, we do.
Consider
Okay.
it.
So we need a motion to continue.
I would think so. Dylan, would you take the motion to continue for our next meeting,
Sure, to the February
for the
20th.
20th meeting? And we have our timeline for how we want to work this so that the ordinances can be read.
Now, would you, so with that timeline that, us, there is a public notice period that would be 14 days prior to the council meeting. So in the scenario where we continue, I would
Before
have
the
to,
first meeting or the first reading or second reading?
for, I guess,
Probably the second reading.
just says 14 days prior to the public hearing, I suppose, so that would, I guess.
Hearing would usually be at the
The
second reading.
So there's no issue. with
Okay, yeah,
timeline,
no.
because I
But
would
it shouldn't be a
just say
problem
that
because of
we
the time
would have
interval
to-
between the two meetings, the two readings.
Yes, so that,
So I would entertain a motion to continue this to the February 20th.
I do have one question now that I'm pretty clear on exactly what you guys need and what is needed for the next meeting. The only thing in question for me is the water and how that, because obviously water's flowing. We have no idea underneath. There's a huge aquifer, and I don't know, like you guys were saying, how deep, how wide does, do you designate that? I was thinking about this because in that section of E, there is the well that comes up from there, and then also the filtration system room.
Marking the location of the wells would be helpful too.
Okay, I can get that for you guys. I'll get pictures, and I'll show you the filtration system room, which is attached to the E building at the edge of it. And
I have a question for you. Are you planning to redo part of what is E? Like you said, you didn't need all of it. Is this the one that your engineer said could go down to half the size so that it would still encompass the well
No, so E was
Yeah.
so that well, there was a mixture of things because E was part of that edge of that dome where it had nothing. It wasn't really doing much. It was structurally pretty bad, but they were because my filter room's there, and our thought process was to actually redo the filter room further out because it's not helping it being so close to the building depending on how the new filters are. I do have a meeting on the 23rd with a really big company that's done about a dozen hot springs nationally, and they pretty much shown me pictures of their filter rooms, and they're huge because there's reservoir tanks of 340 gallons, and then there's a tank that has 200 filters, and so there's you're kind of looking at filter rooms on both sides, north and south, really becoming its own quote unquote, like, I don't want to say shed, but its own real solo building.
Mhm.
So you would have them on both north and south sides of that main building?
Yeah, that was the best way because of the way one I have they're so different. The wells are so different in terms of flow and how they come through. And the idea was that it can plumb in differently into the building and help the circulation of it.
Okay. Yeah, so I would think though, would you guys think the A through D section on that key? What they want to do with that, and maybe just an idea of what you plan to do with the filtration buildings? Yeah, like,
Yeah,
is E going away and how are you gonna add to the, because when you do the designation, it's also the surrounding building, like, there's a general oversight of the
yeah,
surrounding
it's
buildings
called,
as well,
yeah, it's usually called the setting,
the setting.
is what it's referred to as.
Yeah, I can give you guys I think now that you guys have responded that way, I can give you guys very specific key components on the map and kind of do more of like a Google map earth view so that you can see the terrains and where it's going to sit. Yeah.
Okay,
That'd be helpful.
that would be great.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot and goes.
No, that's why this meeting is good, so that we can figure out exactly what we need in order to feel good about moving this designation forward.
Okay,
I
great.
don't want to send this if we don't all feel good about that. Then I will make a motion that we table this designation and recommendation.
Continue it
Continue it,
to the next meeting.
to the February 20th meeting. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so continued.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks.
No,
Okay.
thank you for answering all of our questions, both of you, we appreciate that.
Yeah, and I guess Dan, were you gonna prepare that stuff or do you need my assistance?
I got it, and I'll
Okay.
you and I will work together, and hopefully maybe I'll get Dylan's take or John's take on giving them a draft and say, hey, do you think I hit all the marks? But my idea, I think I do. I'm just gonna make it as clear as day, and hopefully everything on my brain can go on that map.
All right, great. All right, we'll
Great.
leave you guys to the rest of your meeting.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
so much.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Sorry, but guys, this took longer than we thought. Does anyone need a comfort break?
Sure.
Okay. Just making sure.
Dylan, I think I need the new link.
Okay, let me, I'm going to email you this link directly from the meeting.
Okay.
That's what I had to do with,
Okay, yeah, because the one that's attached from Wender's email, it
yeah.
said you were in another meeting.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, so let me send that to you now. Okay, so if you click the link that I will have just sent to you, it's going to let you in as a attendee, and I'll just look out for it. Okay.
Thank you, that was very helpful too. This is thorny.
Yeah, I think none of us really, well, at least myself, Daniel, we did not anticipate some of the complications and the fact that this is kind of a Frankenstein building.
Yes, because it's Frankenstein.
That's a good word
We
for it.
have to look at it in the, not just the whole, but the parts.
Right, and so, yeah, designating that takes into account some of those parts that are not contributing and maybe could be removed versus the parts that are not part of the period, but are very important, but.
Yeah, interesting precedent though, because there's a lot of buildings like that in town, that are Frankenstein, like,
My house is Frankenstein.
Yeah, mine too.
Right.
So Dylan, you wanna start, or Carla? I'm not sure.
I think Dylan's gonna start.
Well, and again, this is a follow-up on our item from last month, talking about the Riverside project for 1535 Minor Street. Of course, we were all here last month, so we started that conversation about the potential improvements, within the building as a whole, but then also exterior modifications and what might potentially be hurdles, stumbling blocks. Get some feedback ahead of time so that the project perhaps doesn't have issues later on. And so the big takeaway I had that, and I will pass this on to Carla and Julie in a hurry, is that you all needed more information on the proposal and what these exterior modifications might look like. Again, this will eventually be reviewed as a COA, appropriateness, and so that will be submitted and taken forward in the future.
It's better to hash it out now,
Yeah, certainly. So,
then have you come,
Yeah, that's why,
application in hand.
that's why we're doing this.
and what
Find
I
out what all the rules are ahead of time.
and I know there's a lot of sort of options as far as potential things that could be changed on the exterior, potential additions to the structure and the like. And so what I'd like to see, and I'm not sure, you may have different goals, but to sort of see, what do we think about each potential option, and then what is the sort of proposal as a whole align with sort of the design guidelines, criteria for a COA as it moves forward. Obviously, we're not reviewing against the COA right now and those criteria, so we don't have an analysis of all of that, but that's sort of how I've been thinking of it as if this were to come before us as part of the public hearing for that criteria, could it meet the criteria? So I'm hoping that's perhaps what we get out of it. And with that, I'll pass it along unless you had any questions for staff at this time.
No, I take it you have some more, okay.
I do.
Promoted to panelists.
Julie, do you want to start off and talk a little bit about since we were here and the significance of it being a theater, what your thoughts are now with putting the sound studio down and really engaging in the theater aspect?
I actually don't even remember where we were in the creative process last time we met with you guys, because we had so many iterations, but initially we were thinking of just having a recording studio on top and kind of like storage and rehearsal rooms underneath. And since we got the demo permit and we opened up the space, and it just screams that it needs to be a theater again, like a real music venue again. And so we're hoping to put the recording studio in the basement. And I think now that I'm saying it out loud, that's where we were at last time I was here as well. And then the idea was to add an elevator so that the basement rehearsal rooms and recording studio would be ADA compliant, and also so that you could get to the apartments on top without having to go through the business to an elevator to go up to the apartments. Because that, if I'm the owner, that's probably fine. But if I sell the building, they're not going to want apartment owners to come traipsing through their business and go up an elevator to their apartments. So that's kind of
Dylan, it came up and then it went away.
Oh yeah, if you don't click it like really fast.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so then look up. I just sent. And yeah, we need to work on that link. I don't know if it's an HPRC link issue or
City
how
link.
it was just set up. So I'm gonna look at that. So it looks like you're in now.
Yes. So, and there's been a lot of work done trying to put it together for you guys to kind of give an idea. And the first thing we want to talk about is the extension of the residence on top, which is the Julie's residence primarily. Or it's unit C is the extension. So today, this is what it looks like today. It is siding, and it meets it. It's hard to get a good image of this because the trees, there's those two massive trees right there. But you can sort of see here, and I'll show you an elevation as well, that this is that wall, this is that side wall that you're seeing here, and it actually extends across, so the elevation on the east and the west sides are the same. So it's got the
That's vinyl siding that you can see from the outside of the building.
Yeah, so this orange piece is existing today, and that is unit C as it is today, and it is, the brick is the brown shade, and the orange is that siding that you're seeing on the side there. So what we're proposing is that orange that unit stays the same, but then, and you'll see in plan view here in a minute, that plan view extends further out to the edge of the building, ideally to the edge where it meets the elevator, if the elevator is approved there. So from there, so you see this is the addition, the level 2 addition. So it's on the west side of the building only. This would be the roof deck here. And what we are looking at in elevation, so the current unit C floor is approximately 2 feet higher than the rest of level 2. So what we'd like to do is lower unit C. So ultimately we gain a couple feet there in unit C, and the parapet remains the same. So the brick parapet there is that line there that you're seeing. And then essentially level 2 would be all one level. Because right now level C steps back in the backside. So the elevation at the front of the building does not change. That's the elevation. And what we did is we just extended that roof line that is part of within the brick portion of the building. We extended that through to the back, essentially. And so from a view standpoint, so view W is taken from approximately the backside of part of Bojo's. Bojo's is quite long, but the edge of Bojo's is here, and there's a staircase in the back of Bojo's. And that's where that view is taken. So you can see that extension as it's drawn in elevation. That's what you're seeing there. And then UX, which is adjacent to the moose, you're seeing a portion of it peeking out here. And this portion is actually that portion that you actually see today. The roof line's a little bit different, but the vinyl siding, the existing portion. And then in UY, which is taken from about the corner of Minor Street over here, this is that portion you see today. The roof is a little bit higher than the existing roof. So I left this in so you can see the existing roof today. I can zoom in on that. So that's the existing roof today. And so by just extending the northern roof, I guess, by just extending that it is below the front of the building, but it is slightly higher than the existing roof is today. But this is the portion, this is similar to what you see today if you were to take those trees away. And then you do get a little bit of that front of the extension, the real addition there. And so from a precedent standpoint, you know, we were looking at different ways. Julie really liked the idea of, you know, expressing that with glass so that it sort of falls away. So we were looking at different precedents. This is one of my favorites here because you know, it is a stone wall. The stone wall is very similar in geometry to what our brick, the south elevation, the back of our building is, and it's very similar in the way. So our roof is not a shed roof. I'm sorry, not a gable roof, but it does indicate, you know, what it could look like with the glass, with a large glass frontage there, and then just some other precedents to talk about how glass can play with that. And then from a material standpoint, we know we have existing brick on the lower part of the building, and we're looking at a wood or a teak horizontal slats in lieu of the vinyl siding that's there today. And then the windows would be more of a black iron accent where we have windows. So from that roof addition, that's kind of the first ask is, are we within shooting range here, I guess, of
Okay, so let me ask you this. Would you like us to tell you each piece as you go along?
Yeah.
Okay, so roof addition. When I look at the guidelines, new additions, it's on page 28 of our guidelines. Consider the effect the addition will have on the historic building itself. And I think that Carla showed us that with the west view, the view from the Moose, and the view from Minor Street. The negative effects that may occur to the historic building fabric as well as to its character should be minimized. Minimize loss of historic materials when part of construction and addition must be avoided to the extent possible. Do you guys have an idea of when that unit C was built?
No.
I mean, you know, like I know that that's not the easiest ask, but I wanted to ask.
No, that
No
unit
idea.
C was, I mean, no.
Could you
No
say
idea.
like, is it 60s, is it 80s, is it 40s?
When was vinyl siding invented?
I would
That would
say,
give us an
I would
idea.
guess that maybe the 80s.
I think it was probably post 84.
So it's well after the period of significance.
Okay, so it says design an addition that's such that it will not obscure or destroy the character. And it should be visually subordinate to the main building. It should be distinguishable from the existing building, so it can be understood as a more recent change. It should be the material should be similar to that of the primary structure. And windows in addition should be generally the same as those of the existing structure. And that is a little bit different than what you're showing there. Although I have to admit, I kind of like the difference between like the brick and window, because that shows that it's an addition and that it's very clearly not the same. But I think that's one of those areas that I've seen that is open to interpretation. What do you guys think?
The idea of doing glass was when they wrote the guidelines in 1966. They thought that was a good idea, and the reason was modern architecture. Everyone thought it was going to last. Modern architecture was going to last forever, and so everyone was doing glass, and it only lasted. Modernist architecture only lasted another 5 years. But when they wrote the guidelines, they said, okay, glass that way it looks like it's a different structure. You can see through it. So in 1966, they thought that was a good idea. Since then, I think a lot of people thought, well, maybe that isn't such a great idea. However, I don't think there's ever been an official opinion about that from the Park Service. I would say from my standpoint of what I saw, the massing of what you want to do on the second floor, I think the good thing is where you want to go further south, you have set it back from the east side.
Mm-hmm.
That's important because that means you're making it less visible. As a matter of fact, someone on the street might not even know, is that your building or is that the building next door to you? So I think that's something that looks like it fits within the guidelines. To me, the only question is, you're going to rebuild where that addition was and whether or not it looks subordinate. Now, it would be easy to call it subordinate if it was a little shorter. Is that just too much of a practical problem for rebuilding it, for it to be a little shorter so that you can see that line that you want to carry back for where you are reconstructing the existing addition? If it were a little shorter than the top of the brick going to the north from that point.
More like the line of the building as unit C sits now, the roof.
It just would look subordinate, so in other words,
Yeah.
it looks a little lower.
So are you saying to drop the orange and?
To drop the orange,
Well, the orange,
it doesn't have to be the same height as what's there today, but just to make it look subordinate. Is that a practical problem on the inside?
I don't think it's a practical problem on the inside. I think the thought was in re-roofing, it would just be much simpler to re-roof it as one roof, right? I think that was the thought there.
Okay,
Because now we'll have a step there which exists today.
but you are planning on getting rid of that 2-foot space that we see at the bottom of the orange unit C right now. You're gonna drop that down so that all of your existing second floor are all the same,
Correct.
the same level.
The goal on that was to be able to have enough height in the orange section to put, like a second floor, like a little loft. Not a full floor, but a loft area.
Just in this.
Yeah, so if we drop it down too much, we'll lose the height. to
But
it.
how tall is that in the orange area, roughly how tall is that at the south end?
We're 14 feet here.
Okay, so if you were to have like an 8-foot ceiling, so it wouldn't be a loft you could stand up in. Anyway,
Not at the south side.
at 14 feet, you wouldn't be able to make a building height anyway for both the loft and, in other words, that would be like a sleeping loft or a storage loft.
At the other side, I think it is high enough.
It is, yeah. it
Yeah,
is high
at the
enough
other
here. But we would not have a loft on the south side, but the loft would tuck in. Sort of right in that zone under
But
the existing.
The guidelines say that it needs to be clearly subordinate.
It should be subordinate, and there's different ways of doing it. The easiest way is always lower, smaller. And the key thing is it doesn't look subordinate. Now, to some extent, it's subordinate in terms of material, and that the brick is considered it is a more expensive material, more durable material, say, compared to, say, if that were wood siding or something else. It's like I said, just the easiest way to do it is if it looks a little lower.
So that roof line comes down and drops down a little bit further.
Yeah.
How does it drop right now on unit C, Carla? Do you have that?
It currently does this.
So it's like a 1-foot drop.
Yeah, roughly, probably a little less than that, but it could be just, we take the same angle that we've been carrying and might lose a foot right there.
But a foot will make it so we can't have a loft. We wouldn't have 8 foot and 8 foot.
Yeah, so we are at, level 2 is at 116. And that location right there is at 133.
That's
3, yeah.
17 feet.
17.
That
Yeah.
would still give you 8 and 8.
Yeah, we just have to look at how far it comes in because some of that space is in that new space. But I think that's good feedback. We were looking at subordinate being, it is lower. It's not broken or lower than the existing roof, right? But we're looking at it as it is lower than the front of the building, I guess.
Right, but it looks like it's just a continuation of the front, rather than being a distinction between here's historic building, here's addition. And so that's why the dropping of a foot, it's not the only way to do it, but it's the
Yeah.
easiest way to do it.
Yeah, and I guess I would question, you know, if I were you, I would question, but I'm not, so, but I would question, would you ever even perceive that if the material's different anyway? Would you perceive that that roof is from the ground? Would you perceive a foot even, you know?
Well, does the orange area come out to the east wall of the building? It's in the same plane as the brick?
It does, it's
So
basically
you
this
would,
right
you
here.
would be able to see that there is a drop, even if it's just a foot.
Okay. Yeah, you don't see it now because there's big trees.
I mean,
in front of it,
it'd be
but-
nice if it was 2 or 3 feet, but just
Sure.
1 foot at least says, okay, it's a nod
Check
to
the
it being
box.
subordinate.
Gotcha, okay. Okay,
How do we feel about the rest of the addition? I agree that I like that it's on the west side. So that if that tree fell down, because right now the tree blocks some of that, but if that tree fell down and someone's standing on Minor, we don't see it. Like it's not immediately right there.
Again, it's being subordinate from that direction
Yes.
as well. Because it is set back, that will by itself make it look shorter.
Patty? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that you won't be able to see it. So,
How do we feel about like taking it out to the back, to the south end of the building? Because it's more on the west side.
I'm okay with that, like I said, because it's at that point, it's the rear of the building, which will be the least observed side of the building. So the fact that's going all the way out,
Is the W view, is that the general idea is to have that bank of windows like that?
potentially, yeah, depending on how much glass you guys like to see. I think there's a balance, you know, do you really, I don't think anybody necessarily wants to live in a fishbowl. Maybe you do, I don't know. However, but I think that the intent is to have some glass there and potentially look at.
Well, that looks like it wraps east, south, and a little bit of west, like just from the rendering.
Yeah,
showing.
so I've been studying kind of the different, so right now, this is sort of a translucent wall so that it doesn't give you a very specific, you know, what it is, because the windows can be, so this wall here,
Okay,
I think would likely, in studying it, I would recommend that it's not a wall of windows on that west side, that they are windows that are in keeping with that addition, but harken back to the rhythm of the windows that are elsewhere in town, which are sort of
something
similar.
similar.
so does the west wall go to property line or is it set back?
The west wall goes to property, so it is actually a party line.
So
Party
you'll
wall.
you'll be doing transparent walnut for the fire rating. If you're on property line.
What's a transparent?
You can buy glass that's rated to where you can have what looks like a window on is a window on a property line. It's very expensive, but when you're on property line, there's all kinds of building code issues. If you put a window on the side property line.
The 2-hour wall there, so, yeah, so that's a good point, and we're still very early in design, but you're
That's right.
right, it would
Yeah,
be,
because actually that's quite a bit of glass, so that's quite a bit of money.
yeah.
So the alternative would just be wood or whatever.
It'd be a solid wall, so it's a.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got different, I can show you different, you know, versions of that box looking
If-
different, but
If you could have windows, that's better. It's just usually people choose not to because of the cost.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it's a party wall.
Yeah.
With it's above the party wall, but it's a party wall essentially, so.
If it is cost prohibitive to windows on the party wall, would siding be acceptable to?
Well, I think at that point, it's you're one of being a building code issue. I would say siding would kind of make sense because it's a different material than the brick, wood siding, not vinyl.
Not vinyl.
But
No,
wood siding
wood
would make sense,
siding,
Yeah,
because what
sure.
you're doing is you're differentiating the addition from the historic building.
And then should we talk about materials at all?
Yeah, we can talk.
I had a real quick
Yeah.
question. Do you have a view from the highway?
That's more like the moose view.
Yeah.
Well,
that
but
view
I mean, when you're
is-
driving down I-70,
Mhm.
as Michael said, you don't really see it, but I'm not sure that I
You'd be seeing
agree
what's
with
next to
that.
Bojo.
You're gonna have to ignore the stare a little bit until we get to the conversation about that, but I can share you, we will get to it, so.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm gonna
What's it
have
look
to
like
sort
from
of
the highway?
fake it a little bit, cause I don't have the highway in here, but I can.
The elevation of the highway.
I don't have the elevation of the highway or the.
Maybe as looking at the bag of Bojos.
The highway's lower there. So you're not quite street level, but you're not as high above the city as in other places. You're probably gonna have you can see it, especially if you're going eastbound, but if you're going westbound, you're pretty much blocked by the most.
You do a street view. On Google Maps and see if that's.
Oh, yeah, I could pull up Google, that's a good idea.
I think before going to materials, it might be worthwhile looking at the elevator because that is part of your floor plan in terms of understanding, and that's actually the part of the big issues is your floor plan work.
I mean, it's. We can get these in chunks, like this is okay, and then the next one, if that's not okay, then that helps us design, so.
There's this, like, you can't see the mass, obviously, but there's a sense of what.
To
you
me,
can
it's
see
just as
the
one
day.
member, I
You
think
can see
the
the yellow.
footprint of your second
There is-
floor
So actually.
looks okay.
Something.
Oh,
So here's Citizens Park there, so we're right next to it, let's see.
if you're like here. You're looking
Okay,
at
so-
the building. You'd be able to see it.
You're right,
Because
I
this
know.
is the current edition.
So you don't see it at all
1980s
from, so you do
vinyl
see
siding.
the addition, right, you would see it just above it, right here. So here's Julie's unit C right now.
I don't know that it's being shared.
Being shared.
Oh,
Yeah,
Um,
okay,
Can you try now?
no, it's still,
You just have to click, like, do a reshare of the new
Yeah, it's
screen
on.
that you're on.
gotcha,
Since I think you're just sharing the presentation right now rather than just like the whole window. Which is fine.
there. Sure.
There you
So I can't really zoom in on here, but you can see that unit C is right here. These are the trees to the park. So you would see it right here.
Can you click further down the highway there?
And it would be lower than that roof line, right on the west. Bojo's roof line.
It would be lower than Bojo's roof line for sure, yeah. Because that Bojo's building is fairly tall.
Keep going.
Yeah.
So that whole unit C right now is the width of the building.
Yeah.
So it would be this piece right here, and it is, remember, unit C right now is 2.5 feet higher.
It's the width of the building at the orange part.
At the orange part, yeah.
Right, and then the addition would only be, like, is it 50% of the building?
So
Yes.
you would still be keeping that same width where it is right now, but just adding on the addition
Yeah.
on the
Just right
west side.
there.
Okay. That's a good call. That's good to see from the highway. That makes it a little more clear.
Because it's a lot taller than ours, isn't
It is, I mean,
But Bojo's isn't your direct neighbor, like your direct neighbor actually sits lower than you know.
right. Right.
it? Yeah, just having building envy.
I think they did a lot of that, pre-84, because 84 is when our design guidelines came into being. And 86 is when they officially petitioned to be a National Historic District.
Designated, yeah.
This is kind of a free-for-all before that.
Have you been in some of these? I mean, yeah, I do. I think it was a free-for-all. I, like, if you see the pictures pre-86, there are sad shingles and on the fronts and.
So you're not really lowering this building, you're just lowering the inside.
We're just lowering the floor down so that we
Right.
can get enough room to have a loft
Okay.
without raising the roof. And also because the structure underneath unit C is literally a house of cards.
Yeah, it's.
And this is this,
Scary.
this is the 2 to 3 feet
Yeah.
that's just like there and it.
It was the original
Deck.
deck, we think. And then I don't know what kind of crazy person came in there and put the floor there.
Pre-1984.
It's so scary.
Well,
I
the
don't
building,
know.
Raise
the
the
building
floor.
was condemned in like 1980, either 82 or 84, when it was a theater, because there was a fire danger.
Yeah.
And that was when like all of downtown caught on fire, like Placer Inn and all those places.
Oh, I didn't
And
know
that's
that.
when I think this change happened, because that's when it stopped being the theater, and I bet that's when they built those apartments, but that's just my guess.
Well, those front apartments,
Those are existing,
I think those are
I was
considerably
talking
older.
about the,
The
but
C,
that-
apartment C.
That apartment C was, I don't know what,
I
like I said.
mean, it's
yeah.
like, it's built on twigs and then
It
there's
it
a
really
deck
should have
and then
been,
it's built on twigs again.
it could have been
It's like-
slightly before that too, and that could
So
have been.
how do
slightly-
Usually it's chicken wire and newspaper.
Oh my gosh, I see the tar string, I think.
Yeah.
So how
I
do you,
mean,
like, I
Yeah, I
like,
wanted to put tile in the bathroom and my contractor was like, nope, not adding any weight to this, look under here, I was like, nope.
no, that makes sense. So how do we feel about the roof? Cause I wanna be able to give them direction. I like your idea of lowering your foot. But I don't have huge issues, even if you can't do that whole wall of windows.
Mhm.
Because we do look at like, how much is this gonna cost you to do this? And you're gonna have building codes that doesn't have anything to do with us.
It could also be wood, as far as I'm concerned, wood siding would also be okay.
Yeah, not
for-
vinyl
okay.
siding,
If we're talking about,
but wood.
if we're talking about the three sides of what goes west from the brick, wood siding is, it's an acceptable material.
We show them the material that I like, or is that later?
Well, I think, we could pull it up, I don't know that we. I think,
I was suggesting that we look at the elevator next, because that's part of their floor
Yes.
plan. And part of the shape of the building.
So I think with the roof deck, the roof, you're okay, like, I think with that, as long as that building looks subordinate, I think there would not be a big tussle when you came for a COA.
Okay, cool.
As long as your materials are appropriate, and we will look at, like, I think it's important you already have them, because that's something we do take, we take a
Right.
good look at. I agree with you, maybe the elevator should come next.
let's see if I have those. I'm not concerned about the materials you're gonna want,
Okay,
because they are a higher quality material than what you typically see sometimes.
well, it's not,
Around
it's
here.
just that it's not a natural wood, and so
Yeah.
it's a.
But it
made
still
from
has
rice
the
husk.
appearance.
Yeah, it looks, you can even stain it like wood, it's made from rice husks.
So the question I had in really digging in and studying this a little bit, and the slide's kind of a mess, but it really, there's sort of purposes for it. So, if you take away the stair, and my understanding from reading the guidelines is that this, the like fire escape stairs are sort of appurtenances to the character of the building. It's, it's maybe not the character of the building, although sometimes you could argue that, right? In this case, I would say that it's not. So I looked at a sketch where, okay, what is it really that we're looking at here? And we're looking at the shape and size of the existing building, and we're looking at the openings that are there. And in this particular case, the openings are very utilitarian. It is a theater. In keeping with theaters, the front of them are usually the ornate side, and the back of them are very utilitarian and not very fun. The function is to get people out of the building. It has a function, right? We know that the doors today the doors themselves are not historic, and they're not of the period of significance. We know that in looking at sort of the doors right down here, we know that there was a lintel there for those doors. But if you look at these square openings here, there is no there's no lintel, which is curious, which makes me wonder if these openings were in fact
Ventilation?
original, or if they were, well, they're being used for ventilation now. At what time they became ventilation, I don't know. If they
Those
were
openings might have been cut for that purpose, and
later
there
on.
never were openings there originally.
That's what I see from looking at the brick and from doing sort of a forensic look at the brick.
I think that the question on the elevator is more about, are you encroaching into the right of way or not? I think that's gonna be an issue for the city.
But that's not a question that you answer. That's a
Well, we
question for.
answer, how is this from a historic standpoint? And
There is a health, safety, welfare criteria in the COA. It's like criteria 7.
So what does,
That is a consideration, but what we have been talking about is that particular piece of information. The way that you guys go about getting these approvals is kind of like critical for this process, and we have to, I think what you're really trying to see is if there's other things that you would need to do to determine whether or not this is ultimately a good
100%.
project, and the COA is kind of, it's not secondary to that, and it would certainly consider this, but it's not really like to your point, it's not the primary body that's going to be deciding that particular bit of information, although it is criteria.
Let me just get a personal opinion. I think an elevator is a very good idea. It's a desirable thing for that to be there in the building. There's all kinds of ways you can deal with what it looks like. I'm thinking more along the lines, if you come in and we say yes to this, and then the building official says, no, you'll have to come back because you're going to be asking them to change what we had approved. So that's that is a reason for us to ask about it now.
I got you.
So that you're not in a situation where we've said yes, they said no, you have to come back to us because you want to do something different than what we said okay to.
Yeah, no, and I believe that the way we've kind of laid out the schedule is that we know that, like, you know, we're talking to you guys now from a work session sort of standpoint to get your feeling, like, is the look of anything on the back, whether it's encroaching in the right of way or whether it's just on the back of the 5 feet of land that's on that is part of our property, right? Part of the property, is that look even acceptable?
are you guys still wanting to do the double doors like on the east side?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, like right down at the bottom there, was that going to be?
You mean to the park?
No, not on the
No.
south side, southeastern
South
corner,
side. Oh,
south corner, south side, eastern corner.
yeah, so let me,
east edge of the
let me,
south.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, let me walk through kind of the slides I have, and then let's, I think, maybe dig into it, because that might help answer some questions. So option 1 would be just taking that one door. So this is the existing elevation, or not elevation, this is the existing plan on the back. So you've got the stair, this is the property line here, and this is essentially the edge of the
Wall Street.
yes. It's not really a curve because it's the same elevation, but
so that's not the Idaho Mall, is that the Idaho Mall?
Idaho Mall is to the right of this.
Oh, that's Idaho Mall.
To the left of this, sorry.
And that gray shaded area, that is the edge before you drop off into the little Idaho Mall walkway.
Okay, yeah, so this is city right away here. This is this is our property line. Here, let me apologize that it's not darker. This is our property line essentially. And so the existing stair sits within the property line, and we have 2 doors on the back. Option 1 would be we do nothing. We do nothing except request that we can put in a double door, essentially, 6 to 8 foot opening in lieu of that door there, that existing door. That would be option 1. So if you guys come back and say, yeah, we just can't see you doing anything to the back of this building, we would request at least a larger door opening. Option 2 would be to place an elevator and a spiral stair. And the spiral stair is allowed as long as we are under a certain number of occupants on that second level. And so that would allow us to make the spiral stair is functional, but really if you're up there, it's compact, yeah. And so that's the smallest footprint we can get is by using a spiral stair. Sort of fun too, but the reality is we don't have to meet ADA, we don't have to meet certain building codes because we have one exit out the front of the building.
How do people get upstairs now, other than the building, other than the stairs on the back of the building?
There's a stair on the
front of the building, there's a residential only entrance with a stair that goes up to the apartments.
Okay.
And so that's one exit or entrance in from building code. So in looking at it, so that would be option 2, and that's what we're asking for. To address sort of that city council question. One thought we have is, you see the gray shaded areas here, I'll show it on this side. The gray shaded area here is potentially request, could we trade this corner? So then the city could look at their master plan and say, okay, you could do something with that area as it's coming around and adjacent to the restrooms there, trade this portion of the property for an equal square footage there, so that.
But still leave your
something
door coming out though, onto city
Yes.
property. Well,
We
don't
could
come all the
get
way
rid
down
of
to
that
that.
door. Yeah, we could actually get rid of that door, close off that door if that were the trade.
would you be
Is-
willing to leave that as not a man door, but like just the visual
opening?
outline?
Sure.
Because that preserves the back end of the building.
Like the shape of the door would still be there.
Yeah,
So Carla, in this, I don't think I've seen this drawing yet. So are you putting the double door right next to like in the middle of the theater? Is that what you're doing?
so there
Oh, I
is,
see, that works.
yeah, so there is an opening, there it is. So if you look at this picture here, this is the existing back of the building. And you can see there is some sort of cutout. You can actually see it from the inside too, but there's some material in front of it, so I couldn't get the inside picture. But there is an opening here. And so we have to do some more, and I don't know why there would have been an opening there.
Isn't it right above where you put the coal down into the existing
It is,
restroom?
but I don't, I'm not, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. It was a significant size opening there, though, for some reason, but there.
Would you have to move
cannot
all the
find
gas,
this-
you would have to move the gas structures?
Yeah, the gas and the electric would have to all change and move and get cleaned up essentially.
As just one member, I would say I don't have a problem with the double doors because there's the idea that the front is the A side, the side street is the B side, the alley is the C side, where all of the stuff that you normally don't see goes. It's a little different here because that is used more by pedestrians, but that's gonna change if the parking garage gets done.
I think we'll still have Idaho Mall, but I don't have a problem really with double doors, as long as they're, like, they look as though they belong in the period that the building, like, that would be one of my, I'll tell you point blank, that would be one of my
But we could definitely come back
Qualifications,
to you
yeah.
with some options on that, just now that we know that it's a possibility, right?
With a double door. So the other thing and looking at, the initial thought was, oh, yeah, we put those, we come in with a brick and put the arched openings so that it matches other openings in Idaho Springs, but that isn't what this building, that's not what this face of this building is. In fact, the front of the building doesn't really even have a whole lot of arches to it. So, I agree with you. It needs to be part of, so it looks like it's part of.
I'd say if you did 1885 to like 1910,
And it is utilitarian with what you're doing here.
yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be ornate. but
It's
it
sort of
does-
like, it's the
yeah.
right shape, the right materials.
Right.
One other thing, did you happen to notice, were there any sort of barn sliding doors? Did you see those on any buildings?
Where they slide across the
Yeah, where they
face of the
slide
building.
across, because that's one way you could actually hide the second door.
I mean, that would be great. I would probably put a garage door on the interior that you couldn't see just for
Mhm.
security. But I think the sliding door would look amazing.
Yeah, I think that's an option. I think we were looking at, and I didn't put them in this presentation, but we were looking at like the Roberts Brothers garage. I think Bojo's has sort of a larger door that it's not a true barn door where it slides, but it has that barn door look with the smaller lights up above.
I will caution you, there is, I think is it it's westbound,
Westbound.
has a garage door, and that door has been a bone of contention.
Talking
Here,
about the one on the front of the building?
yeah,
Yeah, that would not
Yeah,
fly.
no, there would be,
it would
like,
look
even in the
more-
back,
it
I
wouldn't-
would,
It wouldn't.
totally
be-
go
No,
with that
I would
window.
love for anyone to be able to see it.
Yeah.
I'm saying put the barn door idea on the exterior and then on the interior, because those aren't not very secure.
That's
On the
similar to
interior, I
what-
could put something more secure and it wouldn't show, but I could still have my security. So
That's very similar to what they did at Pickaxe, although it's not a barn door, they open.
They open
Yeah,
that
it's also an industrial type of door.
Yeah, and that was
They don't use much anymore.
I don't know
But the
if Mike, you were
sliding- yes,
here
sir.
when we did that, but that was a major compromise for that project, but it ended up making that space really cool on the inside when they open it.
The sliding barn door would really go well though, because if the elevator idea and trading land idea works with the sliding barn door, then
It
you
doesn't-
have full room for the city to put the table and chairs that they want to put in their mall concept. You have the full depth. and
from a
you don't
city
have doors
standpoint,
coming out.
I'd be more concerned about the utilities that are in that corner, like that's,
How do we camouflage them?
yeah.
Well, it's more that the utilities are on the curb line, the sewer line, and that's something that their team needs to work through. Yet, they've got to make sure that the sewer line there's sewer line, there's high pressure gas, and there's a low pressure gas line right there,
And it
so.
goes right along that curb.
Yeah, so that's something that we still have to work out. I don't know that needs to influence your decision at this point. 'cause we
No,
haven't
I'm
figured
just
that out
curious,
yet.
no, that doesn't influence the decision, I'm just curious. What do we think, so what does your elevator look like? What does
Yeah,
your-
so let me go through that. So we've got the elevator in the corner, basically, and it would basically eliminate, we'd have to have an opening so that essentially you'd enter the elevator on the south side and it would be a two-door elevator, and you would come out of the elevator on the north side. So you could pass right through it.
So entering on the south side, would you keep that door similar to the period look? Because one of my concerns is if we change, like when you look at the design guidelines, it has to go with it. If you're changing some of it, it needs to look like it belongs, like that door just moved from that wall to the new wall.
I think so. The door would likely be larger, slightly larger.
It doesn't have to be identical, it just needs to look like it's.
There was an
fits.
opening, yeah.
That's
No,
what
and
it
that
says.
absolutely would be the intent. Now I say that with a caveat because we've gone back and forth on this and we've kind of looked at two different options where. All right, so let me kind of walk through. So this is sort of showing it in a translucent state. So you would see that you have that spiral stair in the elevator there. And that's in contrast to what you're seeing
Oh.
there.
And one other thing, wouldn't it actually there be an overhead for the elevator, so it might actually stick above your roof?
It wouldn't stick above the roof
Okay.
because the roof is at 14, remember? Or
Okay.
it's now at 13. But.
It's not higher than your roof,
It
okay.
wouldn't be higher than the roof, right? So one option would be a glass elevator, which is an option, right? And that would be, I think, I really like this one where it's a glass elevator with black iron around it, and it's a very simple elevator, and it can travel. And the idea is that the whole box would be glass, so similar to this, but with, you know, the spiral in it. It could be sort of an industrial sort of structure with the glass around it and the elevator and the stair visible through that piece. Another option might be to do it in a different type of a brick, but use a brick that is that has a pattern to it, that portions of it are somewhat see-through, so that it feels like it very much is a different brick structure than what's on the rest of the building. But we use the patterning and potentially being able to illuminate that, so it has some interest from that pedestrian mall back there.
Well, and that goes
from
along
the
too with the
highway.
new addition, they have to look subordinate, like, it
Right, they
has
have
to
to
be
look
clear
different.
that
Yeah.
it's an addition and not the original building.
Right. And I think, you know, in this image, these are very square openings, similar to the utilitarian openings that we have there. So I kind of like that image, but this is, you know, just looking at sort of this half of this image here, it could be that you've got sort of that brick patterning, whether
Like a
it's
texture.
yeah, and that kind of reminded me of what we were talking about for
For the diffusers
right?
inside, yeah.
This is kind of a side one, but those look like casement windows. You wouldn't be proposing casement windows. would you? Okay.
No, yeah, I don't have the windows in here yet. We're
Because
just trying to get form in here right
because
now.
in terms of window type, that's
Very
it's also,
different.
it's an important characteristic of the type of openings.
Yeah,
Would
That
wood
makes sense.
siding also be an option? Carry that around?
it could be. I mean, we could look at doing a wood siding there.
I think that could be really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thoughts, commission?
I don't like the glass.
No,
I don't like the glass because it doesn't match anything else in Idaho Springs.
No, I'm with you on that one. I generally like glass, but I don't like that.
It's super
I like-
expensive, so that doesn't hurt my feelings.
I like glass too, but it doesn't match anything
No,
in
even
town.
in that like rendering, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't, it's discordant.
The first thing
Yeah.
that struck me was the amount of time it's gonna be taken cleaning all that glass.
I thought about that last night too.
I think
It's like, if they go for the glass, I'm gonna really.
I
So-
think brick or wood siding would be okay. It needs to be a different brick. It would be better, again, if it wasn't, it was a subordinate type of brick. In some way.
Match too.
Yeah.
But then I think the idea that you've got, the second floor has siding, wood siding. The elevator tower has wood
I
siding.
think that would be much more cohesive and pretty.
So are
From
you-
an architectural standpoint, that's
Yeah.
better. I'm not sure historic for an architectural standpoint.
Yeah.
Yes,
So are
I
you
would do.
looking at enclosing both the staircase and the elevator?
Yeah, so that the staircase is no longer slip and slide in the winter.
Well, and it also takes away the fact that anybody that walks down Idaho Mall is gonna be, oh, where does this go?
And we do
Yeah.
get a lot of things up on the roof currently, which is scary. And homeless people right here.
So that stairway and the elevator are not heated spaces?
We haven't gotten that far yet. I mean, if it's enclosed, I would,
I was guessing they wanted to be heated, but I don't,
yeah, I would
it
guess
sounds like you're
that,
saying they're not.
well, yeah, I mean, if they're enclosed, I would say that they are somewhat, you know, there's
They're
some sort of
insulated,
condition, they're
yeah.
conditioned somehow.
Okay.
Did you have a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, what would be I guess, you know, the width of this, you'd obviously remove the current staircase.
Yeah.
What's the proposed width of this new structure on the back?
Yeah, so we
Like
have
the
five,
depth out to the mall walk or the
I
width
guess
along the
both,
line
yeah,
of the
what's
building?
the whole?
Yeah, both
square?
Going
ways.
south
Both
and going
dimensions.
east.
yeah, so the existing, right, the existing to the property line is 5'2" from the building.
Right.
And we are asking for an additional like 4'6" right now.
So it'd be 10 feet. And then what about, going
And that
east?
is, so to the door, basically, that's the center there, so, it's 21 feet essentially from there to the edge of the new door that we're asking
Right, but
for.
the door wouldn't be enclosed, the enclosure would be more like 15 or something.
Yes.
To that effect, okay.
Yes.
Just asking because obviously, you know, it gets us point to the scale and bulk of a fully enclosed space as opposed to say having a exterior stair and an enclosed space that's maybe only 6 or
That's a good point.
7
So it's
feet.
about 15
So
by
if
10.
there's any concerns about a 15-foot wide sort of wall versus maybe a 6-foot wide, you know, a wall
Half that, yeah.
with an exterior staircase that, you know, maybe not be optimal, but, you know, I don't know if there's consideration on whether either or neither or both could be supported.
Honestly, if I had a choice between a staircase and an elevator, let's be honest, we're taking the elevator.
Well, my
Take the
concern,
scare and.
like, I actually
No one's gonna
prefer-
use that stair unless it's on fire.
I think that's a good concern about how big that's going to be with both the elevator and the spiral staircase, because I don't remember, like, is the spiral staircase a new idea? Because initially it was just an elevator, and now we've doubled that.
Well, we had a
space.
stair, but the stair, if we did a conventional stair, with landings and,
Yeah, it
yeah.
had to go.
It would probably be even larger.
It would be,
Square
it would be,
shape
one.
so we tried,
I'm gonna go back to devil's advocate.
Okay.
Why can we not put both of them inside the building?
So that from an elevator standpoint, our existing upstairs units are fighting with where that elevator wants to be. So we would, and it's fighting with the existing L2 floor plate and and what the theater and the sound rooms at the lowest level would be, where they can be. And so there's multiple sound rooms down there, and we've got to move that elevator around. Can it be done? Potentially, it could be done. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to just say, you know what, that elevator is going to go outside. We don't have to worry about soundproofing the walls around it for the sound room. We don't have to worry about where it's popping through in the middle of the
Living room.
auditorium space,
Yeah.
or we don't have, and we can actually figure out, yes, we need a corridor to get somebody from the front all the way to the from the back of the building to the front of the building, but we can.
So that totally is understandable from your perspective.
from our perspective, yeah.
Yeah, from your perspective. From our perspective, though, from a historical, looking at the back of that alley, is that elevator the best thing? Like, that's, because we could get lost in the weeds here. Like, I can see several directions where we could take this discussion. I'm dragging more myself than anybody else back. Is that an appropriate addition for the back of this building? Like, we're already, I think we all feel like, I don't know, we all feel like the double doors would be acceptable as long as they look, like, I don't have a problem with the double doors.
I'm okay with that as an addition, and for me, it goes back to, it's the seaside. And basically accommodating the building, I'm basically okay with it, because you're putting it on the alley side, even though it is Idaho.
So putting what?
Putting an addition on the rear to accommodate the elevator and the stair. And hopefully you can work out whatever in terms of your encroachment into the right of way.
I think. Yes, I was kind of going back and forth, like, you know, I don't think we can get an elevator in a 5-foot clearance. It's potential that we could get an elevator and put the stair outside of that, you know.
There are those smaller type of residential elevators but that depends upon what's the purpose, but you do have that if it's only a residence on the second floor.
Right.
And those can fit in a much smaller space.
Right. So it is a potential that we could get, if we choose to do a smaller elevator and we could fit it in that space. The question is still the same for you guys. Is an elevator on the back an acceptable, you know, is a new enclosure on the back acceptable?
I think if we take the elevator out of it, I think it's an addition. Like, I think that's where we have to look, like, I know I keep getting hung up on the elevator and could you put the elevator inside? But if we look at it as it's an addition. Like if we take out, like they have to do a trade or whatever, you have to do smaller there, how do we feel about that addition? Because if you look at the original picture, it's got that janky old stairway, like I would get rid of the stairway too. That stairway is clearly not historic, it's ugly, it's not doing anything, and I don't think it's safe. So,
I'm okay with an addition, as one member, I'm okay with an addition.
In closing it, I like that, and it would look a lot better than what's there now. As long as it was done correctly.
what do you think, Patty?
I would like to see it on the inside, but,
Take the elevator out of it, take the,
No,
just look at it
I'm-
as an addition.
okay, I am.
Okay.
There wasn't one before. I just, again, I think it takes away from what the building looked like before. By building that addition there. Is it okay if we do it? Yeah, probably, that's my personal opinion. I think my opinion would be if the small elevators like people have in their houses so they can go from the first or second
A
floor.
tube elevator?
Yeah, but what is the purpose of the elevator? Is it gonna be for your personal use, or is it gonna be for all of the
Well, it's
people?
also ADA compliant for getting people. to the
But you
basement.
guys don't like,
Required for the
Oh,
building.
so
You
so
don't-
it's during the basement as well.
For the business.
Yeah.
okay, so this is for the
Oh, okay.
business as well.
Okay, so
Okay.
that
It's
would
not
work.
just.
There's no ADA requirement for this building, just to be,
Oh, really?
I don't think so.
Because
Okay.
It's a historic,
it's an existing building that,
Or that ADA requirement, there's a, I mean,
Well,
I thought we
it's-
were adding the basement
Building
building
code,
code.
would
It's-
building code.
that'll be for the building official to decide.
yeah, we,
A lot of that has to do with how people manipulate their cost estimates as to whether or not an elevator is required. One of the guidelines in terms of when you have to put an elevator or not is what percentage increase, what percentage of the cost of the project are you doing and how an elevator fits into that. A lot of contractors will sort of manipulate their numbers
Gotcha.
to avoid having to meet the requirement.
I guess part of my hesitation too is bringing it out onto what the city owns now.
But that's not for you to decide, because we don't, city council will have to vote on that. If they are even willing to
To do the trade.
do that.
there might be two options for you guys. One option would be, you could come for a COA for all items, and it could be a condition of approval that you can build like that potentially.
Of course, yeah.
The other option would be, is you could come for the other items and leave the elevator until after that goes. The benefit of that might be you move quicker, like through the development process, and then it's a minor, it's either amendment for the COA, or it would be just a separate COA, but it would just be like focus on that one issue.
So I guess where I would go, Patty, is if we were to say, okay, we're gonna find a small elevator and it's gonna fit within our property line, it's gonna fit. Our property line is right here, but we're gonna enclose it. Is that, and we're within our property line, but we're still building an enclosure on the back of the building. Is that something
Yes.
you're questioning still, or is that?
Oh, no,
okay?
that would be
and
appropriate
even
in
though,
my eyes.
yeah, well, and it's not even so much the city, like us making a decision on the city. My concern is that we vote to go ahead and give you a COA that is conditional on taking land that is not yours, like, doesn't matter if it's the city's or anybody else's, like, I worry
As a matter of
about.
fact, we can't do that.
Yeah,
The
that's,
city would have to be, they would have to sign off on it
Yeah,
if we approve it.
I don't want to be that, like, saying, oh yeah, we'll vote and say this is great. If you get this, like, if it was your property line as an addition that is subordinate with appropriate materials, I would be okay with it.
Yeah, legally, we couldn't do it. We'd have to have the city sign off and say, yes, we're
Yeah.
agreeing to them using the city property.
Right,
Yeah,
and
no,
that would
that's
be
kind of
finding
goes
a
back to John's.
skinnier, or, a longer skinnier elevator.
Would you still, if you kept it on that property line, would you still do the double doors? Like right there?
No, I'd probably put it back at the corner. The double doors were moved to accommodate so that we could do a land swap with the city.
Okay,
So the city would have a deeper area for tables and chairs.
I'm okay with either location on the double door.
I am, okay, yeah, I don't mind it, like, I don't mind the double doors going from side to side.
I don't either.
No. And I think, I have to say, I think your point is important with the seaside.
Yeah.
Even though this is the alley side, if we keep it still aesthetically pleasing and it's subordinate to the main building.
And it's, to some extent, that is, still falls within our purview because it's the setting again. In other words, it's not a utilitarian alley, it is a pedestrian alley, which means a lot more people are going to see the back of the building, but at some point, there has to be some place where all these utility functions can take place.
It has to be, I mean, you can't,
You have to get in and out.
well, and then you have to get in and out, that's the
Yeah.
other thing, so, no, I think that's really good, so the next step would be to, apply for the COA, and I think we'll work with staff to figure out that timing on when we approach council again and when we come to you guys.
If you came to us with a COA where the elevator was on your property, you probably wouldn't have a whole lot of fuss from us. Otherwise, we can't do it. Like, that has to go through the, like, that has to go through the city first.
Yeah, and I would think in terms of this board, I think it would be, there are several ways of satisfying the design guidelines.
Mhm.
In other words, if we were to say no when we see the plans, it's not saying that can't be done, it just needs to be done differently.
Sure.
Tweak it.
Yeah, no, and at that point, we would have real detail about, how the bricks need, if it's brick, how it's being coursed, or how if it's wood, then how, the
Brick and
windows.
wood sounds, I like that idea,
Mhm.
brick and then wood on top, like that feels pleasing aesthetically.
And architecturally, doing the elevator in wood actually does make sense. Not historically, but architecturally, that does make sense.
Yeah, and I had an option for wood, but it wasn't fully baked, and I thought, well, let's just see how you guys feel on the form and shape of this thing first, so. But the next round, and so just so you guys know, Julie is working with a grant writer for historic preservation, and so she is working to get.
Yeah, the
We are
same
working
deadline
to
that
get-
Dan has.
Right,
We're working to have our.
Yeah.
You guys are already
documents.
designated though.
We're designated, but we've got to get a plan,
Documents.
documents through in time. So
So I got a lot of work to do now. Just a couple of months.
Plus any restoration work would probably be eligible for tax credits.
yeah, and we definitely need to do.
Not new
tuck and
construction,
point.
but
Yeah.
restoration would,
Yeah,
Is it Kentucky or?
tuck point.
tuck pointing, yeah, there's a lot of,
There's
we
a-
had a guy come in and he's like.
He's ready to get started on the inside.
I
He keeps
know,
calling me
he's
like,
calling you.
he's like, it's so cold out, we need business inside. And I'm like,
And
no,
And they need to make sure they use the right kind of mortar.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the unfortunate mistakes a lot of places make, is they,
Yeah,
He's
if
a
the mortar
special
is
reservation.
too strong.
he's a crazy brick nerd, like, if you knew more about bricks and mortar than.
yeah, and he was really helping us. He was helping us do that forensic sort of look at where these openings are and where
Oh, the
they probably
ventilation.
were.
Yeah, and also
Yeah,
where there needs to
yeah.
be more structural support, because you can see the rock line, that needs
Yeah.
to be structurally supported
And
underneath.
actually, the
Yeah.
National Park Service has a brief on,
Specifically.
specifically on doing
Okay.
brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because it also goes into, what type of mortar
Oh, right.
to select. And I've used that on a building before and even watered it down from the lowest level.
It's specific, because if they do it wrong, it looks like a completely different building.
Well, it'll cause cracking is the problem, because mortar today is stronger than old brick.
Mhm.
So what'll
He
happen
talked
is,
to us about that.
yeah, when you get stresses, it's the brick that'll crack instead of the mortar.
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay, well, I think, thank you guys
Yeah,
very
thank
much.
you.
I think it was super
Thanks for
helpful
entertaining,
and.
all the things, and now we have a better idea of what's possible.
Yeah.
And what's not possible, so.
So we'll be working fast and furiously here to get details and drawings, and then I think our goal is to get in front of you next month.
That'd be February 20th.
And we put it in the schedule, and I just can't remember exactly where we were with getting in front of council again and all that good stuff. So, but we're hoping to have some good thoughts about how we might be able to work within the council's ability. So, and it may not work. So, we got to look at other elevators and that kind of stuff as well. But we're getting there. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for going through what you did
No.
to give us better ideas, and that was much easier for me to look at and understand
And
than
visualize.
where,
Understandable. Yeah.
The
And
drawings are great.
good.
Yeah,
Well,
very
I would have
helpful.
liked them to be more, but I
don't think Carlos slept for the last week doing this.
but that's about all I did.
I think we needed to see that though, so we could tell you yes or no, like, if you came to us with this, we would say no, if you came to us, like, that's a waste of everybody's time.
That's
If you
why
come
I
to
was
us-
trying to do reconnaissance before I start a project. I want to know what's possible before we go into the whole design phase, and then everyone's sad at the end.
And as you know, as a work session, there's no guarantee on
Of course,
what
yeah.
happens, but this is helpful for us as well to better understand what you're proposing to do.
No, and I think, Lisa, you said it to Dan, it's, we're working as I don't know exactly what you
It's a
said. but we're
partnership.
working as
No, this is a
partnership.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, and we have seen this in our HPRC, people don't see this as a partnership. If you are in a designated building, you are agreeing to a partnership. It's that simple. And I can't.
Yeah.
You can't unpartner it.
I can't unpartner it. Like, that's why I said to him,
Know what you're getting into.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
please know before you step, because there's no take back seats.
And one of the things that's really good about your project, which we usually don't see, is the fact you're staying close to historic use.
That's
That's
such
something
a cool theater. Like,
that's something
it needs
that's
to be
highly
that.
desirable
Yeah.
and usually doesn't happen.
So,
Yeah, no, and that's, that's the beauty of adaptive reuse, because you're extending the life, but in this case, Julie really wants to extend the life of the
The
true
history, yeah.
history of what that building was. And so
Yeah, which is
I think
what we
there's, it's exciting. It's exciting in a lot of ways, right?
Could it be a music theater or a theater, like a
So kind
movie
of,
theater, or,
well,
because we would really love a movie theater.
I played it that way.
I wanted it
I
to be,
keep
I wanted it to be
advocating.
like a music venue, and my thought was, wouldn't it be so cool to have like a couple times a month, just have everyone bring your lawn chairs and have movie night with popcorn?
$5 movies.
Yes,
wouldn't that be
Yes,
fun?
yes, it would.
Right? Yeah,
That would
or,
be huge.
yeah, or in the summertime, have art installations, and then in the wintertime, have a place for musicians to play, because there's so few places in this, there's so many great musicians in the summer here. I don't know where they go in the winter, but they're gone. It's kind of sad, so.
Well, no, we would rather hash this out with you in a work session.
Okay.
Because when you come to us and it's a COA and we're like, no, that makes it really ugly and it elongates the process, and that is not
Yeah.
fun for anyone.
No, I've done a lot of remodels, and I always try and figure out what makes everyone happy, because we do all have to work together before I get too far into it. Otherwise, everyone's grumpy, and that's not good. So.
Yeah, no, and you guys, you wouldn't be in these positions if you didn't have a passion and care for the history. And so we want to make sure that we're working with you to understand that, and to give you something that you're comfortable with, that does meet.
Well, and that honors the
vision.
building too.
Well, honors the
Yeah,
building,
exactly,
but we
yeah.
also have to look at, and unfortunately, I'm
The
seeing this,
district.
the district, and people are coming into the district and they have ideas. And I don't know that they necessarily understand this is a historic district.
Mhm.
You can't undo it unless we throw you out, which means no tax breaks, which nobody likes.
No, because tech point's really expensive.
Having to already done
So
one
sure I hope the
renovation in
foundation.
town.
Yeah.
Like, I put $100,000 into the house and it still wasn't done.
Yeah.
So if we can help with the tax breaks, we would like that, but you have to like work with us.
So I'm trying to. I
Yeah.
hope you guys know that.
No, just like, I worry that's one of the things that we worry about, I do anyway, is what kind of precedent do we set? Like, I don't want to give away our historic district, so, I know sometimes it seems like we're being a hard ass, but I don't want to
No, I think you guys have
away.
been great.
And we really appreciate you
Yeah.
taking what we
Yes.
tell you and then coming back with
Yeah,
that.
Yes.
so that we can add some more onto it.
So wait, so
Bring
the
that.
COA
It's a creative
is
process.
short,
So,
the
yeah.
COA is, look at the plans, and we go, nope, love.
It makes it so much easier if everybody agrees ahead of time.
Yes.
So,
So we appreciate you.
thank you, we appreciate it.
Is there any public comment, like, cause that was last on my list, is there public comment on something that is not, do we have public comment at all? All right,
There's no one else on the meeting.
okay,
Nobody loves us.
that's okay, yeah, that's okay, so if you guys don't have anything else, I am going to end our work session at 8:39. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thanks for entertaining us again.
No problem at all, thank you.
John, is there anything I need to do?
Sites and